Hashem's. Okay, so we are holding the Chumash. We're a little bit behind in the study. So we did a chapter of Tehillim from today, but we're going to go back to Monday's class. Today's Wednesday. We're going to go back 2 days to Monday, and we're going to learn the census. Now, for those who were with us on Sunday, will know that Hashem commanded Moshe to count the Jewish people. There are 2 reasons why Rashi gave over there that Hashem commanded Moshe to count the Jewish people. One of them is that, I forgot to mention, Harvey. Today's class is dedicated by Harvey. Thank you very much, Harvey Karpinos, Dr. Karpinos, for dedicating today's class. We really appreciate it. Today's learning is dedicated by you and make all these classes possible. Yasher koyach. Thank you. So there's 2 reasons why Hashem, the Jews are to be counted now. One reason is because the Jews just died in a plague, and Hashem wants to know, you make a census of people after a plague took place, you need to know how many people there are. And another one is Moshe is about to pass away, and Hashem counted them when they originally came out of Egypt, and now before it's time to him to pass away, they will be counted again. So actually, there were, I believe, a total of 4 times that the Jewish people were counted. How many times did Hashem count the Jewish people? A total of 4 times. One of them is being counted now. The other one was a long time ago. The third one, the one earlier, was by the dedication of the Mishkan. At that point, the Jews were counted. And if I know the other 2 times correctly, I believe one was after the golden calf, after many Jews died by the golden calf, and maybe another time right when the Jews left Egypt to know how many Jews left Egypt. So there were total, I believe, 4 countings. I didn't check this out before I verify this, but I believe there were total of 4 countings of the Jewish people. So in the WhatsApp group, I did post pictures of the numbers, and they kind of stayed the same. 1 or 2 tribes lost a lot, and Rashi is going to explain a number of the ideas. So stay with me as we learn this fascinating census that's being taken. So of course, we start from the oldest tribe, Ruvain. Ruvain is Bechar Yisrael. Ruvain is the firstborn of Yaakov, of the Jewish people, and Ruvain has 4 sons. Now, let me explain to you actually now it's going to be in a Rashi in a little bit, but let me actually bring it up now. Who is being counted here? It's not just the 12 tribes being counted, and then the tally of tribe 1, tribe 2, tribe 3, how many people are in Ruvain's tribe, Shimon's tribe, and so on. But we're going to count all the children, all the boys at least, the men's house, all the boys at least, that were born and alive at the time that they came into Mitzrayim. Who were those people that came into Mitzrayim? Okay. Now, the question we're going to address is, if your mother was pregnant with you, are you counted even though you weren't born? And we're going to see that question addressed, who exactly is being counted. You'll see in Rashi in a little bit in today's Chumash. So let's go in. It's going to be very interesting. So Reuven had how many sons? He had a total of 4 families to him that were born when they came down to Egypt. And we have a family house, the tally of how many, mentioning all those people that came down with Reuven to Mitzrayim, and then how much do they equal together. So we'll do verse Hey and Vav, 5 and 6. Reuven was the firstborn son. Bnei Reuven had Chanoch, and they called Chanoch Mishpachas HaChanochi. They called Chanoch the family of the Chanochis. And Palu, Mishpachas HaPalui, was the Paluis. And then there was Chetzron, Mishpachas HaChetzroni. They called them the Chetzronis. And Carmi, Mishpachas HaCarmi. Carmi had the HaCarmi. Rashi says something very interesting here. Basically, he tells you the name, Chanoch. And then he says, you want to know who Chanoch was? That was the family of the Chanochis. Okay, thank you very much. Why do you have to tell me that? Rashi says the name that he nicknames all the names puts a H, a Hey before the name, and a Yud after the name. Ha-Chanochi. So instead of calling him Chanoch, put a H and a Y, a Hey and a Yud before the name and after. So they're calling them Ha-Chanochi. Why are you doing that? What's the point of this? And Rashi tells us very interesting an idea which you mentioned in a previous lesson. Rashi says that the nations of the world would make fun, would denigrate the Jewish people. And they said, how is it possible you guys are like basing your tribes based off the father's lineage? You even could not protect yourselves. You didn't have control of your own body, right? A taskmaster would come, get you out of bed at 2 o'clock in the morning and start beating you. Why do you think that you could oversee that your wives were faithful to you, right? How do we know that Egyptians didn't come and rape the women? And who says these really are children of those fathers? So the mothers, we get it. But what about who? There's no DNA test back in the day. How do we even know that this whole story is true? So Rashi says, very interesting. That is why a hey was put in the beginning of the name and a yud at the end of the name. Ha-cha-nochi, what we know from our Tanya class and so on, that the letters hey and yud are Hashem's holy name. That Hashem is testifying and saying, God says, God, am testifying that these people are who they say they are, and the fathers really are the fathers of these children, and it's not made up. And that's why the Chanoch and everybody else gets to Ha-cha-nochi, gets a hey and a yud, the letters of Hashem's name, because Hashem is testifying that they really are the fathers. He also says, as we were also studying Tillim, I'll just mention Rashi it says these are the tribes of Hashem. Edus, that God is testifying that these really were the sons of those fathers, because we needed it. It was important that we have Hashem to testify that it is who we say we're. Today we could just do like a DNA test and find it out. But back in the day, obviously they didn't have it. Therefore, a H and a Y, a Hey and a Yud, Hashem's name is put there now. It's a fascinating Rashi. You see a lot of stuff we're going to learn in these census that are not just the census taken over here, but a lot more information what it tells us. Okay. So he had 4 children, and if you total it up for 7, Zayin, Elim, Mishpachas, Ruveni, this is the whole tally of this Ruvain tribe. The Yuv, Kudehem, and their numbers were, the tally was, they were 43,730. So what I did, obviously, because I was interested, I wanted to know how much were they relative to the other census? Were they more or were they less? So I looked it up. In the previous census, which we're talking about 38 years ago, before the sin of the spies, and before they traveled in the desert and these plagues that happened, all the way right when they built the tabernacle, before they continued traveling and all the calamities post that took place, it used to be 46,500. Now people have passed away with the spies from this tribe and other things, and then young people have grown up, and now they're left 43,730. So about 3,000 less than they were 38 years ago. Okay, now he goes on to say, one of the children, Falu, one of the children, verse 8, of Bnei Falu, Eliav. I don't know why he's on this. 1 second. Why am I lost there? Who was Falu? Sorry. Yeah, Falu was son number 2. So son number 2 of Ruvain, right? Let me just see here. Falu was number 2. Falu also had a son whose name was Eliav. Uvnei Eliav, and then Eliav had a son. He's getting into a little more details. He wants to tell you the grandchildren, and you'll see why in a second. So one of child number 2 of Reuben that we mentioned had a child called Eliav. And then that guy, Uvnei Eliav, had another child, had 3 sons, Nemuel, Dasan, and Aviram. Nemuel and Dasan and Aviram, and we all know who's Dasan and Aviram. That's what he wants to point out in the census we just made. The 2 famous characters, who Dasan and Aviram, those are Dasan and Aviram, Kiriyeh Ha'eda, who were chosen by the congregation, who incited a shahitzu al Moshe al Aaron, that incited against Moses and Aaron, right? They tried to rile up the Jewish people against Moses and Aaron. They ubadas Korach, with a group of Korach, and they tried to rally everyone up against Hashem. So they were not good instigators. So he's just telling you that last census we took, that we spoke about proving that there was 43,730. Among them were those 2 characters. By the way, Dasan and Aviram also were the people who wanted to kill Moses originally. Wanted to get him in trouble because when he killed the Egyptian back and when they were in Egypt. Anyway, the Torah is just going a little bit out of the way here within the census to tell you some other interesting information about that family we just spoke about. And what ended up happening, verse 10, with those people, Vatiftach ha'aretz espiyah, and the land opened its mouth, Vativla isam, and it swallowed them up, as Korach and Korach, b'moisa eda, when the nation died b'chayla eish, when the 250 men were killed by that fire that came down from heaven to burn everyone with the pans. And it ended up becoming a sign, like a flag, like a sign, that nobody should argue with to try to be a kohen. So just a side note, a star on that very famous story. Here comes another interesting point that the Torah brings out in the census. So it's going off from just giving you a census and shares with you another very fascinating piece of information. And that is that he actually lets you know with the sons of Korach. And me and you know, we've been studying Tehillim, we've been saying Tehillim, and we've seen some of the Tehillim composed by Korach, right? No, Korach's sons, I mean. Now, look what the Torah says about Korach's sons. Uvnei Korach lemesu. The sons of Korach did not end up dying. They didn't die. And Rashi says, why are you telling me they didn't die? Because Rashi says you should know when the family was plotting, and then when they sat down to have their family meeting to decide what to do about Moshe, the sons were part and parcel in the strategy and planning meeting in order to go against Moshe. But when they saw the huge fight that broke out between Moshe and everybody else, and they really actually, I guess at some point, really regretted what they were doing. They did tshuva, like we're learning in our Tanya class. They did tshuva. They really returned. And a very interesting Rashi here, and I studied the comments. I'm going to share with you what Rashi says. I'll read Rashi's words, and then maybe I'll share with you. There's a debate exactly how to understand this. This is what Rashi says. When they repented, Hashem elevated an area like on top of Gehenna, on top of hell, and they sat there and they were saved. Fascinating idea. What in the world does that mean? I remember as a kid always, like when the ground opened up, kind of shelves popped out, and these people didn't drown. So where did they ever go into the ground, or did they not? Some of the commentaries I believe that I read want to explain that they actually got swallowed, and once the rebellion was kind of hush-hush and completely put down, they came out of the earth. So when it swallowed them, their father died and everything else, but they themselves never got swallowed. Some people say spiritually that they went into hell and then they were brought back. So it's an interesting question, but somehow they repented and they returned and they survived. And we even have Tehillim composed by the sons of Korach, and they did not end up getting swallowed with the rest of the Jewish people, which is a very fascinating piece of history. So again, we're talking about a census here, but all these really cool stuff are coming up within the census. So we finished the first one. Now let's go on to Shimon, Bnei Shimon, the children of Shimon, the mishpachosam to their families. How many were there? Lenemuel, he had 5 sons. Shimon had 5 sons. Mishpachas Nemueli, one of them was Nemuel. Liyamin Mishpachas Yimani. Then there was a second one was Yimani. Number 3, Liyachin Mishpachas Yachini. Number 4, Lizerach Mishpachas Azarchi. There was a Zerach family, and the Shol Hamishpachas Hashauli, and to show the tribe of the Shulis. And I'm going to come back to this really long, very interesting Rashi here in a second. But I want to show you something. Elu Mishpachas Hashimoni. So how many were the total from the second tribe of Shimon? 9 ve'esrim elef, only 22,000 umasayim and 200. And here's what makes it very interesting. If you look at the other census of the Jews, the third census, the one that happened 38 years ago, there was 59,300 people, and they dropped drastically. No other tribe dropped like that. They dropped from 59,300 to 22,200, which means they lost 37,100 members. They lost 37,100 people from the tribe. What is going on over here? What happened to them? From almost 60,000, they dropped down to 22,000. What is going on? So let's see. Rashi shares us some very interesting information. As I told you, what do the numbers say, the census? And we're going to see a very interesting conversation here that Rashi brings up. So Rashi says that if you also look, and you'll look in the story later on, okay, that something happens in the census that is unusual. So basically, if you remember, by the way, I'm going back in history. I don't know if you guys remember this. Binyamin, remember, he went to visit his brother Yosef. Remember when Yosef was viceroy, Yosef had that whole story. He said, bring Benjamin with you. And they brought Benjamin with us. And there was one point with Yosef almost burst out crying. He couldn't hold himself back in. And if you remember that Rashi, we learned then, he asked Binyamin, tell me about your family. Now, Yosef and Binyamin were extra close because Yosef and Binyamin were both born from their mother Rachel. The other brother sold Yosef, but Binyamin was a little tiny kid then. When he was sold, he couldn't do anything about it. But as Binyamin grew up, he had 10 sons, and he named all his 10 sons with names describing the pain he's in from the loss of his brother Yosef. So Yosef's there is viceroy in Egypt, and Binyamin, his younger brother, is standing there and telling Yosef, Yosef says, "No, what are your kids' names?" And he says, "This name because my brother was enslaved between the nations," and all these sad names. And Yosef can't hold it, and he walks out of the room. He doesn't want to show that he knows what's going on, and he bursts out crying. Now, so this Benjamin had 10 sons. We know, so part of the 70 original people that came into Egypt was 10 when they're going to actually move. They're going to get the moving trucks, the wagons that are going to bring everybody down. Part of that 70 is going to be the 10 sons of Binyamin. Now, if you look at the end of the census, in a little bit, we're going to notice that Binyamin is only left with 5 sons. So something's wrong with the census here. I told you the tribe of Shimon had almost 60,000 people, and now they only have 22,000 people. Benjamin had 10 sons coming down and only 5 sons left. What's going on? What happened? What piece of history don't we know about? Why are those 2 tribes? What's going on? So Rashi gets into a very interesting discussion. How are these censuses taken? The fathers of the Jewish people that are counted here, what happened? And he shares he says, I found in the Jerusalem Talmud a story that happened. And we discussed this story when we were discussing the Chumash. You remember Aaron passed away, right? They were based outside the Edomites. They were outside the Edomite country. They wanted to go through. Edom told them no. And Hashem removed the cloud, and then Aaron passes away, and Hashem took away the cloud from the Jewish people. And what happened? The Amalekites, who were dressed as Canaanites, came down and attacked the Jewish people because they thought they didn't have the cloud protection anymore. So what did the Jewish people do? So Rashi tells us he saw in the Jerusalem Talmud that some of the Jews, at least a lot of the Jews, said they had enough. We're going back to Egypt. We're not doing this Israel thing. We haven't been brought yet into Israel. We're being attacked by the Amalekites over here. The Edomites are not letting us go through their country. That's it. We're going back. And they went back 8 journey stops. It took them, I guess, 8 stops to get where they are. They went back 8 journey stops. They started traveling back. So what happened? What happened? The Rashi says that that the Levite family, who would not hear of going back, chased after them, and a major civil war broke out among the Jewish people, and 7 families were wiped out clean of the Jewish people that are the 7 original families that came from Egypt to Israel with 70 nations. 70 of those children were killed in the civil war between the Levite families and the Jewish families, and even some of the Levite families were wiped out from this whole group. So 5 of the Levite families, I believe you said, were wiped out, and then 7 from the rest of the Jewish, seven from the other children. And this is why, I guess, would explain why Benjamin had 4 sons, and they're not mentioned in the census here anymore. You want to know why? Because during the 3rd census and today's census, the 4th and final census, there was a civil war among the Jewish people, and the Levites stopped the Jews from retreating. In that war, they wiped out a certain amount of people, and perhaps that would answer why the Shimon tribe went down from 60,000 to 22,000, because in that civil war they were involved. And that is a very fascinating insight to the census explaining this idea to us. That's one interpretation. Now, Rashi says another interpretation. Another interpretation is explaining why he brings from the Medrash. He shares from the Medrash Tanchuma a different reason why Shimon's tribe went from 60,000 to 22,000. Because we all know the story. Who was the one who led the rebellion against Moshe in cohabiting with the Midianite princess? That was this tribe. It was the tribe of Shimon. He was the one who went to do the sin together with the Midianite princess, and Pinchas was the one who killed him. But why was the leader of that tribe more angry about the law that they couldn't cohabit with princesses than any other tribe? You want to know why? Because his tribe was the one dying out from the plague more than anybody else. And this is what Rashi brings from the Medrash, that when the Hashem attacked the plague at the Jewish people for cohabiting with the princess, and we told that 24,000 people were wiped out, you want to know what tribe it was from? It was all from the tribe of Shimon. And that's why Shimon's census dropped from almost 60,000 to 22,000, to around 22,000, because his tribe was the worst hit. And therefore, when it came time for the leader of any one of the 12 tribes to stand up to Moses, it was that tribe, because his people were the ones that were dying. And that's why he cohabited with the Midianite princess for that reason. Very, very interesting. One more thing I want to share that Rashi says, that we are going to count certain times grandchildren among the list here. And Rashi says that we are counting not just the 70 nations that came into Mitzrayim. We're not just counting the 70 nations that came, the original 70 that came into Egypt. If you became pregnant, if the mother became pregnant in Israel, and she carried the baby with her into Egypt, that baby already has the special soul, the special neshama of being conceived in Eretz Yisrael, and therefore they're going to list him now. Even though he's born in Egypt, he's going to be listed among the fathers of the nation. The only other two people that were conceived and born in Egypt are Yosef's two kids, which are grandchildren of Yaakov, and they're going to be included also in the tally, even though they were conceived and born in Egypt. So fascinating information. Again, we brought down the Talmud, Jerusalem Talmud, which says one of the big reasons why many people died was because of the civil war, when the Levite tribes were trying to stop the Jews from retreating, and many people died in that situation. And another interpretation from the Medrash is the reason why Shimon's tribe got so down in numbers is because the plague, the 24,000 that died in the plague when the Jews were cohabiting with the Midianite princesses, with the Midianite women, it was mostly from the tribe of Shimon, and that's why their numbers were reduced to such a great amount. And then in the conversation of who's counted among the fathers of the nation, Rashi says we want to include also the people that were pregnant, that were conceived in Israel. They are going to be included inside the census. So just some really cool, if you really go into the numbers and see the stuff here, some very fascinating stuff. I want to just share one more point that Rashi makes. I think it's very cool. Rashi says that if you count all the fathers of the houses, you're going to come up with 65 fathers of houses. 65 are going to be the total. Now Hashem made that there should be 70 nations in the world. So you're going to have at least surviving 65. The Jews are missing 5 over the rest of the world. We have 65 fathers of our of the Jewish people, and the rest of the world has 70. So we're down 5 relative to the rest of the population of the Jews. Very interesting comment that Rashi makes. All right. So we went through, let's move on, continue to verse 15 and see what else we can discover in this really interesting census that were taking place here. Verse 15 tells about Bnei Gad, the third tribe, the tribe of God. How many children did the children of God have? They also had a lot. They had 6 or 7 heads of families from that group. They had the Tzfonis, Chag Mishpachas HaChagi. The second one was the Chagis, the Shuni Mishpachas Shuni. They had the Shuni, that was the third one. The fourth one, La'ozni Mishpachas HaOzni, was the Ozni, La'eri Mishpachas HaEri. The fifth one were the Eris. Verse Rashi just says that their name changed. They used to call them one another. He's not sure why one of these fathers' houses changed. Number 6, La'aroi Mishpachas HaAroidi. The 6th family of houses was the Aroidis, and La'areli, and the Areli family, Mishpachas HaAreli, that was someone was called Areli. It was the total of the God, the third tribe. The census said that Elim Mishpachas Bnei Gad, Kudeam Arbaim Ve'elef V'chamesh Me'os, 40,500. So they also lost a lot of people in this tribe. I believe they went down in the census 38 years ago. They were 45,650, and now the 40,500. So they lost 5,100 in the numbers that they used to be. You're going to see some of them went up. Then we move on to the 4th tribe, Bnei Yehuda, the sons of Yehuda. Well, he had 2 sons that died. We know a famous story when the oldest 2 sons died, Er and Onan. Remember they died because, and this in Tanya class pointed out, because they did not want to impregnate their wives. So they wasted their seed on the ground. From there, Chassidus and Kabbalah learns it's a great sin to waste seed. But anyway, these two young men, Er and Onan, children of Yehuda, were the original ones, but they died before they even made it into Mitzrayim. Before they even get in Egypt, the father lost those two sons. Yamis Er and Er and Onan died, Be'eretz Canaan, in the land of Canaan. Verse 20. But who is alive from the tribe of Yehuda? He had also still remaining children that made it to Israel, and there were two sons left that did make it in. The Shelah, one was called Shelah, Mishpachas HeShelani, and the Peretz, Mishpachas HaPartzi, and the second son was Peretz. Now that son Peretz was born, if you remember the story, with the woman that he thought was a harlot, that was really his daughter-in-law originally, conceived with her and had this son called Peretz. Shelah and Peretz, I think they were twins. They were both born from that time, and these two children made it into Yisrael, Zerach, and he also had another son, third son called Mishpachas HaZarchi. So he has Shelah, Peretz, and Zarchi. Verse 21. And now we're going to share with you some grandchildren here, because these grandchildren were at least conceived by the time they got into Israel, and therefore they're counted. By the way, I didn't mention, Rashi says another reason that some other people want to say, that it's not because they were conceived in Israel, it's simply you will count grandchildren when they have a tremendous amount of offspring. So if that grandchild, even though normally we wouldn't count him, because he had a huge family after him, then they would add another number and then bring the grandchildren also into the tally and count them here. So it's a debate. Is it because they were pregnant with them, is one interpretation, when the mothers entered Egypt, and therefore we're counting them here too? Or is it because simply they had a lot of kids, and because they had a tremendous amount of grandchildren, offspring, we're going to add a grandchild also into the fathers of the house. It's very interesting. So Peretz and Chetzron, Mishpachas Chetzroni. So Peretz has an offspring, a child, and he calls him Chetzron. He had two families, Mishpachas HaChetzoni and the Chamul, Mishpachas HaChamuli, the Chetzroni and the Chamulis. Maybe they were like really big families, and therefore we're also going to include the names of these people, even though they're grandchildren. The bottom line is, how many people did the tribe have? Elam Mishpachas Yehuda. This was the tribe of Yehuda. Shisha v'shivim elef, a large tribe, 76,000 and 500. And so these guys grew. The original tally census said they were 74,600, and now they're 76,500. They almost grew by 2,000 census. So these people came out 2,000 more. So this tribe is going up. The other ones are going down. This one's going up. Bnei Yisachar. What about the tribe of Yisachar? Limishpachaisam, to their families. Toila. Wait 1 second. Sorry. Toila Mishpachas HaToilai. He had one son whose name was, he's going to have 4 sons, this guy. Yisachar had Toila, was the Toilis, the Puva, Mishpachas HaPuni, the Punites, the Yashu, Mishpachas HaYashvi, the Yashvi family, and the Shimron, Mishpachas HaShimroni, he has Shimroni. So Yisachar has 4 sons, and they become the father of these, they become the leaders of this next tribe. What's the total number of children that are there? Verse 25. These are the family of Yisachar. And they were Arba, Veshishim of 64,000 and 300. And they actually grew a lot. They used to be 54,400. Now they're 64,300. So they grew by 10,000 people. This family really, the census was much higher than there was before. Here, there's this big Rashi here that I skipped, but I already mentioned it outside, is the debate and the very fascinating discussion of, are the grandchildren mentioned because they have a lot of kids, or are the grandchildren mentioned because their mothers were pregnant with them when they entered Israel? How does the Torah decide which grandchildren? Because mostly it's talking about the original 12 tribes and their sons. But it does count some grandchildren, and here's a discussion that took place. Now, Rashi does mention something very interesting that I mentioned before, and he says that the Benjamin tribe had a tremendous suffering. They were very difficult. So remember, I told you when Benjamin first came to his brother Yosef, they were 10 sons. And then when they came to Egypt, Benjamin had the largest amount of sons. And here in today's census, we're going to see that there are only 5 sons left. We'll see in a little bit when we get to Benjamin. And Rashi has a discussion here. What happened? Why were they 10? And now there are only 5. Rashi has this very interesting discussion. What happened to the 10 sons of Benjamin? Why are there only 5? And I told you that when they retreated, when the sons of Benjamin retreated to go back to run away and go back to Egypt. They didn't want to end up going to Israel. They had enough after they were attacked by the Amalekites, the Canaanites. When they were attacked by them, Levites defended and did not let them go, and 5 of the families were wiped out. The Rashi says you can actually see this in the name that his mother, Rachel, gave him. If you remember, when he was born in a very sad situation. Rachel was passing away. Why was Rachel passing away? Because Rachel stole her father's idols when Yaakov with his wife Rachel ran away from Laban, if you remember that story. Yep. And Yaakov made a curse and said, whoever stole, to his father-in-law, whoever stole your wife's idols, they should die. Like, it made a curse on them. He didn't know that his wife had stolen her father's idols. And she ended up dying shortly after. And she died in childbirth as she was giving to the 12th and final tribe of the 12 tribes, her second son. She named him Binyamin. What does Binyamin mean? Ben Oni, it means like the son of my pain, my affliction. So son of my grief. So everyone thought that it means that, in my grieving, as I'm dying, I'm giving birth to the son, or in pain, and I'm giving birth to the son. But it actually reflected Binyamin's life, because later on, when the tribes will run away, 5 of the children of the sons of Binyamin his tribes will be wiped out. And Rashi says that was only half the calamity that would befall Binyamin. There's going to be a famous story later on after Joshua takes the Jews into Israel, and there will be a whole story it's called Pelegesh Begiva. There's a story there. I don't want to get into the whole story now, but there was a woman who was a Pelegesh. It's like a second-tier wife to a man who was attacked by a mob within the area where Benjamin lived, right? Israel was split up between the 12 tribes, and they raped her till she ended up dying and being killed. And the husband, I believe, of that wife took pieces of her body and
chopped her for 11 parts and sent to each tribe, and said, this is how they treated us. Right.
To show to the other tribes, it is a big problem within the tribe of Benjamin, and they literally just raped and killed my wife, and the Jewish people can't stand for this. They have to do something about it. And when the other tribes got it, they were shocked to see what's going on. And they told Benjamin, we're coming to deal with this woman. And Benjamin said, no, we could deal with it on our own. We will discipline her. And the tribe, somehow there was a conflict. And the rest of the 11, one of the saddest times in Jewish history, the rest of the 11 tribes attacked the tribe of Benjamin. Benjamin fought back and nearly almost completely annihilated and wiped out the tribe of Binyamin. And literally, there were like on a handful of people, or 2 handfuls of to literally numbers on a hand or 2 hands that you could count how many people were left from the tribe of Benjamin. And this is coming into prophecy that the mother originally named her child the son of my grief. It doesn't just reflect that the mother was dying, but it also reflects what's going to happen with the tribe of Binyamin. Half of the tribe will be wiped out here in the story that we're talking about today, in these 38 years when the Jews tried to retreat. And the other half of the family almost completely will be annihilated later on when the Jews enter Israel. Anyway, those who didn't know that story, it's definitely a fascinating story.
Rebbe, plus the other tribes said that they're not going to give their daughters to their
daughters
tribe of
won't
Benjamin.
marry, correct.
Right, exactly. So
Benjamin means son of the right, which means they're supporters of Naphtali Bennett.
Okay.
Benjamin.
Okay. Okay. They're not following me, Binyamin Netanyahu. They're following the right. Which is, okay, complicated. Israeli politics. All right, we'll discuss after. Let's go. It's so cool when you read the census. There's such history which we would not know if Rashi wouldn't share with us. It's very, very interesting. The bottom line is, going back to Yisachar. Yisachar actually grows. They were originally 54,400, another 64,300. Verse 26. Bnei Zvulun, what about the tribe of Zvulun? Based on their family homes, he had 3 sons, the original sons that came into Israel. Sered, Mishpachas Sardi, he had the Sardi family. He had the Elon family, the Elon Mishpachas Eloni, and he had the Yachliel family, Mishpachas Hali Eli. But how much were they? Elon Mishpachas Zvuluni. How much did the Zvulunite tribe overall have? 60,500. If you want to compare it to their old census, they had 57,400. Now they're 60,000. So they grew by almost, what is that? About 2,000 more people were added to the tribe. And now we have Joseph, Bnei Yosef, the Mishpachaisam. If we're going to count Joseph, we're going to count the grandchildren, because even though Joseph's children were born and conceived out of Israel, they are considered like one of the two tribes. So we're going to split them up and count the numbers separately of Joseph's two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. He had two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And now this is the only place the census does this. It's going to tell us who Joseph's great grandson was. It's going to really go into, for some reason, and I'll tell you why in a minute when we get there. So Bnei Yosef, Joseph had two sons. They're both going to become their own tribes. They're called Manasseh and Ephraim. Bnei Manasseh. So let's talk about Manasseh. So Manasseh had a son whose name was Machir. Shpachas HaMachiri. So Manasseh's son was a Machir. They were the Machirite family. And then Machir himself, Hailadas Gilad, had another son whose name was Gilad. The Gilad Mishpachas HaGiladi. He also had a son whose name was Gilad, who's the Giladite family. And then that guy, Gilad, we're already holding out what we were like the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren, also had children. Eila b'nei Gilad had a few kids this guy had. He had Yezer, Mishpachas HaYezri, the Ezri family, and Chelek, Mishpachas HaChalki, had the Chalki family. Now, the Asriel, another child, he's going to have 6 children. Asriel is the third child, Mishpachas Asrieli. Then he had a fourth child, Shechem, Mishpachas HaShichmi. Then he had a fifth child, Shmida, Mishpachas HaShmidai. And finally, his sixth and final son was Chefer in the Mishpachas HaChefri. Now, this guy, Chefer, the sixth son that we just mentioned, had another son. So we're really going all the way down to the family tree here, whose name was Tzalafchad. This guy's name was Tzalafchad ben Chefer. Why is this the only place in the census? Sometimes it's pointing out stories. The Torah is clearly pointing out extra stories here than the census. So because this guy had no sons. He and Banais, he only had daughters, and he had 5 daughters, right? Like, I know some people have 5 sons. Some people also have 5 daughters. What were the girls' names? Shem and Yosef. Tzalafchad was 1, 2 was Machla, 3 was Noya, 4 was Chagla, and 5 was Milka. I'm sorry, 6. I maybe read it wrong. Machla, Noya, Machla, Noya, Chagla, Milka, and Tirza. There was 5 daughters. Now, why is the Torah care to tell us about these girls? Because they're going.
There's going to be a decision involving them about inheriting land.
Court case. Thank you, David. That's right. There's going to be a court case on following these girls, because we know that Israel was given over to the son of the person. But this guy had no sons. So his daughters were very sad, because there'll be no plot of land that will remember their father. Because if it doesn't go over to sons, who's it going to go to? And their father won't have any property. And they loved Israel so much because they were granddaughters, as we're told, of Manasseh. And Joseph's children had a tremendous love, especially Manasseh. The Joseph's family loved Israel. And they were very sad they wouldn't have any real estate because their father couldn't give it over to the sons. And they went to Moses. They petitioned God. It's one of the famous petitions of God saying, listen, it always goes to the son. And then whoever he marries joins the husband. What about if the guy has no sons? And God said, fine. Okay, it will go, I believe, to the girls in that case. So very interesting. The Torah is here going out of the census to point out a side note that this family, the great-great-grandson, had only daughters, 5 daughters, and we're going to see about them later on in history. Moving right along. Elam Mishchais Manasseh, the bottom line, how much was in the family of Manasseh? 52,000. It's pretty cool. It's a very big number because they were only half of Yosef. They were 52,000, and they really grew because they went from 32,200 to 52,000. They grew by almost 20,000 people in their census of 20 and up in this tribe. What about Ephraim? Elah b'nei Ephraim, the Ephraim tribe, the second half of Yosef's tribe. The other one, one of the sons was the Shalchi. There were 3 sons here. The Becher, Mishpachas HaBachri, there was another one called Becher. He was the family of, sorry guys, 1 second, I just went out of place, was family of the Bachri family. And then we had a third son, the Sachan, Mishpachas HaTachani, the Tachan family, Eil b'nei Shusalach, and one of those 3 sons, who was Shusalach, had a son called Aaron, Mishpachas Aaroni, so he's telling us a grandchild here, that he was from the Aaronite family that we're discussing here. Okay. the reason Rashi says why the grandchild is mentioned here, again, according to Rashi's explanation, it's because they had so many children, so he had so many offsprings. So sometimes because the grandchild, even though we don't usually mention grandchildren, had such a big family, they're mentioned here. They mention the grandchildren too because he had so many descendants that came out of him. Here's what Rashi mentions here. What I said before, very fascinating. It says in Devarim, in the middle of the next book in Chumash Devarim, the 5th book of the Torah, it says Atam Hama'at Mikol Ha'amim. You're the smallest of all nations. And the word Hama'at, very interesting point that Rashi makes here, is you are Ha-Ma'at. Ma'at means a little, but there's a Hey before. Hey is a numerical value of 5. So you are 5 less than the rest of the nations of the world. So there are 70 nations of the world, and the Jews are 5 less, because if you take the whole number, you're going to come to a total of 65, 5 less than the nations of the world. Very cool. Verse 37, Elim Mishpachos B'nei Ephraim. The bottom line is, how many people were in Ephraim? They were 32,000. These are the sons of Yosef. You end up being 32,000. And I believe they were 40,500. So actually Ephraim went down in about 8,000 members from what they had from their original census. Very, very interesting. Okay, let's move right along. B'nai Binyamin, what about Benjamin, the youngest brother of Yosef? I told you that there used to be 10 sons, and his sons were named after the fact that he lost his older brother. And here are the names of, I believe, 5 that are remaining sons that are left. B'nai Binyamin, the sons of Benjamin. Mishpachesam, to their families. Lavela. Mishpachas Abali, son 1 was Bela. Ashbel, Mishpachas Ashbeli, the second one was the Ashbelites. Lachiram, Mishpachas Acharimi, and then Achiram was the 3rd son. Now Rashi says Achiram is from the Hebrew word ach, which means a brother. So remember I told you in naming his children, he named them names after how much he missed his brother. And Achiram means my brother. He named his kid after his brother who went down to Egypt, who went down to Mitzrayim. Ram means Achi, my brother, Ram of greatness. My brother, who was my great older brother, who I miss him so much, that was the name he gave his child. Then, continuing right along, 2 more children, because he had a total of 5 left. The Shfufam, Mishpachas HaShufami, and Rashi tells us, what does this name mean, Shfufam? Shfufam are originally, their name used to be Mupim, and now they're called Shfufam. How'd they get the name Shfufam? Because Yosef was Shafuf. He was humbled among the nations, so he names his child after Yosef was taken to being humbled. Finally, the 5th son, Chupam, Mishpachas HaChufami, and that is the 5 sons remaining from the 10 original boys that came down to Mitzrayim. And now he's going to tell you 2 of the grandchildren from these people. Bnei Bela, Ard, and then Bela, one of those sons of Binyamin, the first son of Binyamin, Benjamin, had also children who we're going to name their Ard, Venamon, Mishpachas Ardi, Venamon, Mishpachas Anami. And again, we're mentioning the grandchildren, at least according to one interpretations of Rashi, because they had very large families. So we're mentioning those two grandchildren. The bottom line is, how much was the total of Benjamin? Their families and their countings, 45,000, and 600, and they went up a lot, the Benjamin tribe, which is very interesting. I don't get exactly, because we're telling you that 5 of the families were wiped out, yet their original census was 35,400, and now they're at 45,000. So if half the family was wiped out and they grew in numbers, you can only imagine, if not, how big they would be. So it's just, I don't know, something we got to look into. How come their census went up to 10,000 more, but they're missing half the families were wiped out? Any interesting question that I need to look into. Verse Membeis 42. Dan, these are the children of Dan. Dan had 1 child, which was called Shucham, the Shuchamite family. And that's it for the family of Dan. Shucham used to be called Chushim, but now they're called Shuchan over here for some reason. Call Mishpachis HaShuchami, how much was the total of the Shuchami family of Kudem? Arba v'shishim elef, arba me'os, 60, and where is it here? 64,400, and they used to be 62,700 original census, and now they're 64,400. A little bit more, almost done with the census. Verse Memdalid 44. Bnei Asher, what about the Asher family? he had two sons. One was Yimna, and then Yishvi, Mishpachas Yishvi, or three sons. Livriya, Mishpachas Abri, three different sons. Now, Livnei Vriya, this third son Vriya, also had a child, which was a grandchild. Lechevra, Mishpachas Chevri. One was Chevri, and Malkiel, Mishpachas Malkiel. The second one was Malkiel. Here is maybe why we're mentioning it. Something very interesting in verse 46. We're going to say one girl, besides the 5 girls of Tzanafchad, that are going to have an issue with Israel, there's another girl mentioned here. Shem Bas Usher, this guy Usher, who we just mentioned, also had a daughter, had a son. One of his 3 sons was Shem, and that son Shem had a daughter called Sarach. Why do we care to talk about one girl? Why is Sarach being mentioned over here? Here's a crazy thing, very famous thing, that because she was actually still alive. So it's basically saying that she was the original 70 that came down from Israel to Egypt. She made it through all the years that her family lived in prosperity under Joseph in Egypt. Then she made it through the suffering after all the tribes, all her uncles basically passed away, and the Jews started being enslaved, wherever it was, 200 some years. She lived through that. And then she lived through the splitting of the ocean, the sea, and she was there by Mount Torah, and she was there by the golden calf, and she was there by the 38 years, by the sin of the spies, and 38 years the Jews are in the desert, until the final census at the end of Moshe's life. Moshe is about to pass away. And Moshe is like a great-grandson of Levi. She is still alive, miraculously. This woman is made it through. I don't know, she's got to be a couple hundred years old, which is a big miracle. And that's why they mention this girl, even though they're going by the house of the fathers, she's mentioned here because she's still alive. Now, I think, if I remember correctly, why did she merit such a miracle that happened to her? I believe when they had to break the news to Yaakov that his son Yosef was alive, getting such information after mourning for his son for whatever it was, 17 years, for such a long time. He would have died from a heart attack, and Sarah broke it to him, I think, on her harp, quietly and nicely, and he blessed her, and she was merited because of that to have tremendously long life. So that's why she's in the census here, even though we're going by the father's houses, we are counting her for that very phenomenal story. Mem Zayin, verse 47. These are the sons of Asher. What was the total of Asher? Was a total of 53,400. They used to be 41,500, so their numbers grew a lot. Finally, the last tribe, Bnei Naphtali, the tribe of Naphtali. He's going to have 5 sons that came in with them to Egypt. Liachziel, Mishpachas HaYachzieli. They had the Yachzielis, the Gunis, Mishpachas HaGuni. The third family, the Yetzer, Mishpachas HaYitzri, was the Yitzris, the Shilim, Mishpachas HaShilmi. And they had the Shilmi family. Those are actually, there's 4 total sons. El Mishpachas Naphtali, these are children of Naphtali, Mishpachas to their families, Gudam. Total number was 45,400. Chamisha, Arbaim Elef, Arbam is 45,400. They used to be 53,400, so the number went down. So what's the total of everyone together? Elu Pekudei Bnei Yisrael, the total tally of the people in service of the Jewish people, Sheish Meis Elef, Ve'olef, 601,000. Sheva Meis Ushleishim, 730. So the original number went down a little bit. They used to have 603,000 and change, and now they have 601,000 and change. So it almost went down to 2,000, a little less than 2,000 people, as the numbers dropped to. Some of the tribes went way up, some of the tribes went way down. As we've gone through this fascinating journey here in understanding the census that took place among the Jewish people. Any questions or comments before we do the Tanya class? We have any questions or comments?